You're listening to Level Up with Wondr, a podcast where we take listeners on a journey through the exciting world of gaming, tech, and innovation. Join the Wondr Nation team as we talk with a diverse group of pros who have taken their skills to the next level.
Welcome to another episode of Level Up with Wondr. I am Dyani Marvel, Vice President of Marketing Strategy and Operations here at Wondr Nation, and I am joined today by Nia Grace. Nia has over 2 decades of experience in marketing, hospitality, and business development. She is a full-time restaurateur and owner of Grace by Nia. And she is passionate about creating immersive experiences, blending food, live entertainment, and community engagement. Nia has also worked as a business strategist and consultant, supporting brands in content development, strategy, operations, and more. Nia, welcome to Level Up with Wondr.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
We are so happy to have you. So let's start with you telling us about your background. Let us know, how did you get started in your career and how did that lead you to where you are now?
I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. I'm born and raised here. And one of my first jobs was actually in a restaurant. It was called Purple Cactus. So I was a counter girl, cashier. I really loved it. And I did that because, one, I was in high school and I made a little bit of cash, but I did it because I was actually able to interact with people. I'm generally pretty shy. I kind of keep to myself, but that was a way for me to challenge myself and really meet more people and just get to know the neighborhood. But I loved it. And I realized that I had a little bit of a knack for it. And so, contrary to what I thought I was going to do when I went to college, which was at the University of Miami in Florida, I studied criminology and African American studies. And in my mind, I was on a road to law school. But when I got to school, again, something kind of sidetracked me, and it was our campus activities as well as our campus restaurant. So I started producing events there, started promoting our restaurants, sat as the chair of our activities board, and I just loved everything about it. I think what I loved most about it was I was bringing people together. And again, that person, who kind of like sits in the background and really likes to just kind of stay out the way, but see what things happen, it kind of forced me to be out there on the front a little bit. And so similar to my need in high school, I also need a little bit of cash in college. And so each summer I would come home and work on the Spirit of Boston. So again, something that was down in the Seaport area now, Boston. And I was like my first full service restaurant. And it was another way for me to engage with people, meet people. And I just seemed to really enjoy giving people enjoyment. After college, I pursued a little bit more of our event promoting and talent management. I took those talents to New York and did some of that work. When I got back home, I wanted to figure out a way I could do good and revert back to my original mission of going to law school, which was really about helping more people. I did some nonprofit work. I did that for about 10 years, and it was really about community engagement, marketing, event planning, fundraising, and additional strategies. But during that time, something kept pulling me back into, what we call this restaurant and hospitality industry. Here I find myself back in Boston working at the restaurant, the boat again, part-time. But then I got a little older, right? And I started to come into my real young adultness and was like, well, where do I hang out? And I remember hanging out with one of my sorority sisters, and we walked into this place in Boston called Daryl's Corner Bar and Kitchen. And that was the time that I was so convicted and said to myself, wow, well, if I ever get out of the space of corporate and nonprofit, if I want to own a restaurant, I want it to be just like this. What was so special about that place was that it had live music. It sounded familiar. The smells were familiar. It specialized in soul food, right? What I was used to dining on at home. The art looked like me. And I just was super excited about it. And so I got out of nonprofit and decided to do some consulting work. And one of the clients that I landed happened to be Daryl's Corner Bar and Kitchen. And,
Excellent.
right, to kind of make a long story short, that's how I got back into the industry. But I've been doing it since I was 16. And I think that every path along the way really set me up for today.
Excellent. So what are some of the biggest lessons you've learned throughout your career journey? You've had a lot of twists and turns, so I'm sure you've got lots of great lessons to share.
Yeah, I mean, one of those things, and you talked about twists and turns, go with the flow, right? You just never know where something is going to take you, what opportunities are going to come from it. As much as I try to be very not A type, right? But like, I think that things should have systems. I think that sometimes it's very 1 to 10, but sometimes it could be 1 to 5 and then maybe back to one. And you just got to kind of go with that flow. I also say with that, you got to say yes sometimes. You got to say yes even without knowing how. You have to say yes, even not knowing when. You really do, again, kind of back to trusting the process. And then I say, as you start to grow, and even before you start to grow, when you start to ideate, get some advisors, get some people that, you trust enough to ask some questions to, right? Just somebody who knows something more than you. And that'll help you hopefully avoid some pitfalls.
Absolutely. Now, I know that sometimes our paths are never, actually, quite often, they're never straight. They have something, like, so we twist and turns and lots of challenges, right? So, what are some of the challenges that you faced in working your way to where you are today? And share with our listeners how you overcame those challenges.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the first things that we often have to get over is self-doubt, at least for me. It's the want, it's the drive, but it's the not knowing how. So then you start to doubt, is this for you? Is this a path that you're supposed to be on? As you start to, come through hurdles, whether it be financing, whether it be trying to find space, whether it's rejection, be it on me and the industry, it could have been based off of experience, or sometimes it could be based off of my genetic makeup, where it's like, I don't know if you're qualified or the right person to do this job, just because simply historically it's never been done by you. And so once you can get through that and really just remember why you started, remember that you've got everything that you need. And one of the things I often like to say is, listen, if the opportunity wasn't for you, it wouldn't have been presented to you, right? And so that's one of those things that I rock with. That's my mantra.
Absolutely. Now, you started doing some consulting and you mentioned that with some of the businesses. What kind of inspired you to begin doing that?
Well, it was after years of me working really hard for other people. And it was just one of those things where I had gathered a lot of skills and I was in a transition point. While I loved the work that I was doing, I think I wanted to maybe take a chance on betting on myself just a little bit and looking at the breadth of skill set that I had. Because again, not being on a linear path, I have a good foundational educational knowledge in sociology, right? And that's the study of people. So really understanding people is a great part of me being a very good community engager, right? And so after the community engagement, I was also able to get people to rally around causes, right? And that would essentially raise funds for stuff. So I'm like, okay, great. So then I had a really good streamlined corporate setting that showed me systems, and it allowed me to use technology that was a little bit more advanced than the previous job. And so I was like, well, that's another skill set. And then back to that hospitality piece, where you got to think on your feet. We talk about, soft skills that you could never really learn in a classroom. You learn that in the hospitality industry. And so I said, well, with this big jumble ball, and I'll say this, I had a coworker who let me know, she was known as the fixer in Massachusetts, where she would go to different human service programs. She would know that she'd be there for about 2 years. She'd come in, spec out everything, figure it out, fix it up, get it ready for the next person. And she was out. But she told me, Nia, as you're going along this journey, you're always adding tools to your skill belt, right? And then I was like, well, I've got all these tools in my skill belt. How can I empower other businesses and other people, and particularly entrepreneurs, to take their business and level it up?
That's amazing. I love how you really have been able to take these different skills you learned, you build, you found new opportunities, and really kind of navigated through to open up a world for you of opportunity. And I also love the fact that you had this in your heart to help others, because some people, we get it and we like, okay, I'm going to go focus on myself, but really this amazing and sweet spirit to help other businesses to be great and to use your skills to help them in their endeavors.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is amazing. So you worked with a lot of businesses and you brought an amazing skill set to those businesses. So what are some of the common challenges that you helped them to solve, or the common pitfalls that you saw businesses making?
I think that we often look at our current size and not really plan for the future and the destination of which we're going. A lot of times we just get set in our rut and not plan for the growth. And so that is what I would see with the businesses, right? And so we can call them mom and pop shops. One was a t-shirt shop. One was doing audio rentals and setups for events. One was a restaurant, and then thought that the way of doing it was simply, well, I picked up my phone and I took that message and I'm scratching it on some paper here to take this order and I'll get to it. And I said, or what about we get a website that allows people to put that into a form and then it gives you a data collection, because that's what I was familiar with, right? Then it was, well, after you received all this data, how come we're not reaching back out to them on a regular basis so that we stay up top and present on mind? Some of them just thought that, well, we were lucky for that one sale and hope we get it again, as opposed to strategizing how we get it again and make them a repeat customer. And then again, really, big personality. I always say that this is sometimes to my detriment of one of my businesses, was that people thought that we must have been 10,000 square feet with the kind of marketing that I would do for my first restaurant, which is only 2,000 square feet, right? So when they would show up, they'd be like, oh, well, this is cute, but we just thought it was so much bigger. Like, you've got such a big personality, and that was it. Another thing is that when we do one thing, we sometimes close ourselves off to doing other things.
Absolutely.
And so when I see inquiries, and this was across all businesses, I was like, oh, well, yeah, you typically do t-shirt orders for 25 and you typically get them done in 14 days. I said, but what if we can do an order for 107 days? Why can't we? Let's try to figure out how we do that, right? I remember one of my challenges with my first restaurant, I started doing catering. And within the first year, I increased catering by 150%. Somebody asked me one day, after he kept looking at my menu, which I made very available with pricing, because I was like, I want to streamline this process, make your decision by the time you send me an inquiry. They were like, well, do you do breakfast? And I was like, well, on the catering menu, we don't, but why not? So that was kind of the thing I kept saying to a lot of the businesses. Well, just because it's not what we generally do, why not? And if we could do it, how could we do it well and to our brand standard?
Absolutely. It's a lesson to expand, but also to scale. How can you expand your business? Don't think in that box. It's just a great lessons to teach and for those businesses to learn. I would like for you to go a little bit more into detail into how you ended up with your own restaurant and your own business. I think there are a lot of great lessons there as well.
Well, I love that story, and I appreciate you for asking it. It's just funny, and it just gives me a lot of joy. And I always start off with, that first restaurant came from a series of no's, right? And just keep showing back up. I love to tell the story of how I walked into that restaurant for the first time, and I said I loved it for myself personally, and it became my favorite place. And I decided that, well, if this is my favorite place, I want to help catapult its online image. And so the first thing I did was I offered my services to the current owner. Took a little while, but I got the contract. And then after getting the marketing contract, I was able to work for him full time. Prior to that, though, at my other job, I actually did some services for him through my nonprofit job. And during that time, while I was at his venue, I was like, well, this is a great opportunity. It's kind of like, I'm providing you a service. Maybe you'll hear me out. And I said, hey, will you be my mentor? And he looked at me and said, no, I won't. And I was like, wow, right? And he didn't know me for real, but I just knew that I saw something that I hadn't really seen many people like me attain. And I thought that, well, what's the best way to learn this? But then learn from the guy who did it. And so years later, like I said, I won this contract. But the funniest thing is this: I worked for him for 6 months. And maybe it's not that funny. I found it funny. But so I worked for him for 6 months. And he's like, wow, you're doing so great. All my other restaurant friends told me that, truth be told, he said, if I ever got a woman to work for me, it'd be one of the best decisions I made. It would be organized. It would run well. He was like, and that's what's happening right now. This man had ran the business for 25 years before me, right, with other people and other operators. And so he tells me this at 6 months, and it's the same time he's also giving me a promotion, right? And I was like, well, this is exciting. And so I was like, well, this is a fun time to tell you something. I said, 4 years ago, you met me. And his face is dropped. He's like, what do you mean I met you 4 years ago? And I was like, yeah, 4 years ago, you met me. I came in here and I asked you to be my mentor. You know what you said? And he's like, I said, well, you said no. And he's like, I can't believe I said no. And I said, but it's okay, because guess what's happening now? I work for you. You have to mentor me, and I get paid. I was like, so this is a better situation. Thank you for telling me now. Right. So
It worked.
anyway, that's like, it worked out. Right. But then I go to the next piece of it is that the business that I own is one of the oldest Black-owned restaurants in the city of Boston that is still operating. It started in 1957. It's had 3 owners in total, and I'm the 3rd owner. And so it's a legacy business, one that doesn't get passed on lightly. And just because we say passed on, it doesn't mean it didn't come at a cost, right? And so that cost had to be for him to see my proven work ethic, to see that I actually cared about the product as well as the community that we were in, and the drive and want to really do it for myself. He had to see that. I was able to express that to him at one point and say, hey, I really want to buy my own restaurant. I'm started looking at some other restaurants, and I think that this is what I want to do. I talk about getting my sea legs back, which essentially meant being able to work 80 hours a week. That'd be cool. But I was like, how can I do that for myself in an environment that keeps calling me back year after year? So he called me up one day and was just like, well, Nia, I thought about what you said, and I've watched you over the last couple of years. And, I think Daryl's Corner Bar and Kitchen is a restaurant for you to have. And it was special.
I'm very special.
And so honestly, that's just the first step in getting the restaurant, right? Is at least being able to have a property that you're interested in, it fitting the schematics of what your vision is, as well as we always talk about location, location, location. And then comes the hard part. That was literally the easiest part. The hard part came the financing, the getting the people in the community to galvanize you and me, particularly as a younger operator, one who was really unfounded or unknown in the city. I did a lot of community work, but I wasn't in this space. But they rallied, and that's kind of like my first story of buying my own restaurant. But 10 years ago, I walked in and I claimed it.
You claimed it. Absolutely. Now, we spoke before and you mentioned that entrepreneurs, especially if they're buying a business, they need to ask themselves, did you buy a job or did you buy a business? Can you explain what you mean by that and how that applies to your journey?
Yes. People will buy a business and not want to be the boss, but are the boss, right? They're directing the vision. And I believe in visionaries, and that's what's supposed to happen. They set the tone, they set the stage for everyone and put the pieces in place for it to run and generate. But for me, starting out, I had to buy me a job. Not only did the money that I bought to purchase a business, I then had to allocate some of the funds that needed to be spent in absorbing that cost by being an employee of it. But it's also one of the things that I would advise anybody to do is that it's best that you work in your business first, right? And I actually take that same model from the companies that I worked for to be able to understand what the business did, the company did from soup to nuts. And so that's what I had to do. I needed to know what happened in the back of the house, behind the bar, front of service, right? And then as the general manager and then essentially as the owner. And so I know in the beginning, I absolutely bought a job, but I talked to a colleague and I was like, you're right. I needed to have bought a business. So I figured out ways to transition my job into my business. And that was team members and making sure that I had the right systems in place and quality standards. I built an environment that had really good retention rates. Our industry has high turnover, and I was just really happy to not have such a high turnover. And I thought that I had all the great foundation to finally scale.
Yeah. So talk to us about how you went from that one location to where you are today.
Yeah. I like to highlight partnerships, right? So we talk about a team, and first it's the internal team that is setting your foundation to at least let it be an example of what could be done somewhere else. I credit that original team for making sure that we were showy, that we was winning awards, that the reviews were in our favor, that we had a regular customer base. Let's never discount a regular, right? That shined within our community and people took notice. And the people who took notice were my partners. They were impressed with the operation that I ran by myself, right? They were impressed with the numbers. They were impressed with the concept. It was foreign to them, and they're like nightlife and hospitality giants in our region. It was amazing to get to that point. And my partnership is with Ed Kane and Big Night Entertainment Group. That was like the first step in like even thinking bigger beyond my block is what I like to call it.
Love that. And you are in Foxwoods Resort Casino. So tell us about that location and whatever you can share with us, with our listeners, about how that came to be. Because that's a big win, a huge win.
Yes, it is, right? And at a casino, we want lots of wins, don't we? So, Grace by Nia at Foxwoods is the second branch of the original location that is located in the Seaport. And we opened the Seaport location in 2023, and we opened Foxwoods location in May of 2024. A lot of that is all about relationships.
Absolutely.
And so, my partners had relationships already standing with Foxwoods. And Foxwoods was really focused on, well, what's next? We're talking about future vision, and we understood what worked and we understood what we haven't had, but what's next? So they were really impressed with the brand. They were able to come and visit our location in Seaport. They were really jazzed about it, no pun intended. They thought it would be great to have a dedicated live music venue. And I thought it would be great to really engage the Connecticut population beyond. We're able to employ local artists through that way. We're able to offer a cuisine that, again, is fairly unique to Foxwoods and the Ledyard area. And it's just exciting. It's been a very welcoming experience, and something that, when you hear that your vision that started, again, back to my block, right into my backyard, is like loved by people who are traveling near and far to such a wonderful destination like Foxwoods, I'm like overjoyed. And I said, well, we did it right. And so I can only thank them for the opportunity.
Absolutely. I know I've been there and I loved it. It's a beautiful establishment, delicious food, amazing staff, and it's incredible. So I personally enjoyed it and would encourage everybody to go. But I want to know from you, what do you think makes Nia by Grace so special?
I think it's the details. I am a person that focuses on every single detail, and maybe to a fault, right? Maybe it could be a little obnoxious, but I think it's what really makes it special, from your entry to the way the place is laid out, to the details in terms of how the decor is and all the fixtures and finishings, down to your menu. We're walking you through a show, and that is also within the menu. The cocktails are themed in a way that give you a nod to some old classics, but with a new age twist. We're naming some of them after music as well, right? It's just all of those details and the care. One of the things that I've always said from the small venue to the large venue is that I always wanted everybody to feel like they are coming into my home. And so I think that is what really sets it apart, is that you're not just another number. You're not just another chit or ticket. You are somebody that I want to welcome back again and again. You're literally family as soon as you walk through the door.
Excellent, excellent. So when you look towards the future, are there more Grace by Nias to come? What's on the horizon that you can share?
Yeah, I think that the brand is very portable, as you can see. And then again, it's been a joy to be able to have the first one out of state be in our New England area. And so if I had it my way, I'd love to get back to my roots in Miami and see a little of that jazz down there. And I wouldn't mind being in the DMV, but definitely expect to see more Grace by Nias around.
Excellent. Well, if you put them in other cities, I will go and visit them.
Thank you.
I will be a location scout.
Thank you.
And I wanted you to share a little bit about some of the learnings as an entrepreneur. What do you feel is the most challenging or the hardest part of being an entrepreneur?
It's the discipline, right? You are not working for anybody but yourself. And so it's the standards that you set. The discipline can be hard because sometimes you have a lot of bad days. Sometimes you can get a day where you're battered with no's and you know that you're the one that's responsible for everything. It's that staying motivated. It's setting those systems even for yourself, the same kind of expectations that you have for others. And then also the pivot piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
There are so many things that come to us that are beyond our control. And I had just learned to say, yeah, if it's not one thing, it's another. But I say it in such a way where it's never anything I can't get over, though. It's never anything I can't overcome. My biggest thing is really fixate yourself on being a problem solver. When we talk about creating businesses, a lot of people answer the question, well, what problem am I solving? What hole am I filling? I say that often because that means how you started may not be what it looks like in the middle or how you finish. And you have to continue to evolve. You can't get stagnant or else you get left behind. You got to remain flexible.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what is your favorite part? What's the best part about being an entrepreneur?
Well, to be fair, it's got to be some of the freedom that comes with being able to set my own pace and being able to pour into some of the things that I may not have had an opportunity to pour into my volunteer service side, right, or my board service side, or the community side of things. But it's the people at the end of the day. And so that's not even necessarily just being an entrepreneur, but the specific industry that I'm in. The people give me life, right? So as much as I talked about being a fairly good introvert and fairly shy, like if I didn't see your smile today, I don't know what would get me on to the next part of my day, And so it's definitely like, this is great, right? But it's definitely for people that make this part of the journey worth it, and being able to provide a livelihood, provide a service that people can enjoy.
Absolutely, absolutely. So what qualities do you think every entrepreneur should possess or try to develop?
You got to listen, right? And I say that in a way where it's like, oh, that seems real basic. But I often say you got to listen more than you speak. Sometimes listening is not just audio, right? Like the listening is also the looking, right? And it's also the feeling. And it's being able to be responsive in that way. Sometimes I can be very rigid. And I realized that, and I had a very good assistant general manager who worked with me. We were, let's say, fire and ice in a good way, right? But I was definitely the fire. And they were like, that, that, that. She was definitely the one. I was like, I'm cool. And that I learned from her, because while the things I would say might be correct, while the systems might be accurate and necessary, she would show me other ways to deliver a message sometimes. And then I would watch the responses and I would be like, all right, it responded to me too, but that's cool. Maybe I could do it that way. So that listening ear and heart and eyes is something that you can't go without. I would say that business wise, you need yourself a good accountant, you need yourself a good attorney, and you absolutely need yourself a kind of a small board of advisors. I talk about that, people that I can call in the dime, right? Who will pick up and say, what's up real quick? And I said, I've got a question I got to ask you. I need a quick piece of advice. And so having that small board of advisors plus my professionals that are going to keep my business on track are absolutely essential. And then for me, how do you shut it off? Because one of the hardest things about being an entrepreneur is that this is our business, and we feel like whether we're asleep or awake, what happens in real time, it's our duty to respond to it. I've had to even learn to set boundaries, right, as an entrepreneur for myself to say, listen, at some point I'm going to have to shut it off. Just because you sent me a catering inquiry at 11 p.m., it doesn't mean you need that catering inquiry or that catering at 11 p.m. This could wait. Being able to balance that part of it and not be totally consumed by the business, is a skill set that I've had to learn and a practice that I've had to adapt or adopt fully.
Absolutely. And you mentioned this board of advisors. How do you recommend that entrepreneurs or small businesses go about finding a board of advisors? Like, how did you find your board of advisors?
It's usually through networks, right? I've got a friend who is a nonprofit professional. She's an executive director for an educational organization. And I reach out to her if it's a matter of community. How do I be better in serving the community? I have a really great customer who I found out is a real estate developer. He's also a professor. And I was like, well, great. When it comes to real estate, how do I negotiate better real estate deals? So then he becomes that person too. I have 2,200, like at least restaurant friends and owners that I know. And I say, well, I really like how you're doing it, and including my partners. I loved how they had one umbrella company, but multiple brands under it that all had their own individuality. So unlike me knowing somebody from, a 110 grill, I was like, you're not necessarily the mentor or the resource that I need on my board of advisors, because you're just replicating the same concept. I actually need this brand because I'm watching them create a different identity in different places. And that's really what I want to do. And so I say that a lot of times your network is absolutely going to be your network, but also they're going to be the first people to be your advisors. And you really just got to look at it in that kind of way. That the people that are around you in your circle, they're the first ones that you should go to and find the thing. You're never always going to find one person to take care of all of it. Right. But, so that's why I'm fine with having the entire board of them.
Absolutely. That's excellent, excellent advice, excellent perspective.
Yeah.
So now, if you had a retrospective view here, which we all do, what are some of the proudest moments or achievements? You accomplished a lot. I know you had a lot of great experiences. So if you had to pick a few that were your proudest, what would those be?
Yeah, I mean, I will never get over buying a restaurant by myself, right? And everyone looking at me and saying, well, who are your partners? Who's the team? Outside of the friends and family investment in me, it was believing in myself and
Mhm.
buying my first restaurant by myself. Hands down. I got to tell you, in this moment in 2025, it's probably taken me 7 years to appreciate that accomplishment. So I thank you for that question. And then outside of that, I think with the real big catapult of my star rising, that I've been able to stay grounded and really in touch with my local community and somebody who is super accessible. And because you hear a lot about that, like, oh, well, could you even? No, yes. Like most of the time, you can catch me right on the phone. You can catch me right in the neighborhood. I didn't leave where I came from in the home that raised me. I, in fact, intentionally came back to make sure that I can build and give back to a city that I felt like has given you the joy that you enjoy when you walk into Grace, right? And so to
Absolutely.
me, that is a really big accomplishment. And then being able to mentor other young women and be the example that I absolutely needed to see and didn't have, when I was thinking about this even longer ago than just 7 years.
That's amazing. It's amazing. I love that. I love it.
Thanks.
And you shared with us your vision for, maybe what's the next Grace by Nia. But what's your ideal vision when you think about the future of your business in general? What's that big picture, long-term plan of yours?
Yeah, I want to see more of the concept in different spaces, right? And I want us to take over international waters as well. I really want the music programming to be so robust that you continue to find your new favorite local band or your new favorite, or interstate band, right? Larger than that, I want to continue to build more managers and more owners. I want to expand the network so that we have larger hospitality community, and particularly in some ways, even an African American, Black, culturally based hospitality community that is founded in cultural principles that are unapologetically represent what our history is. And that is what I feel about the brand. And then personally, I want to be able to impart this knowledge, right? The first 15 years of that business management, marketing, and development knowledge mixed with this hospitality and create more people that are thriving in this industry, because as we know, it is one of the hardest to be within and to be successful, right? And so I just want the brand to be a symbol for what is possible, and me, Nia Grace particularly, to be somebody who is always seen as accessible and a person who has wisdom to impart without many barriers.
And I have zero doubt that you will accomplish all of that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
What advice would you give to entrepreneurs trying to find their path?
And I'd have to say, my husband is funny. He just was talking to me about this the other day. He was like, I might have known the restaurant and hospitality industry was hard, but I've never had an opportunity to see it up close like this. And I don't even know how you do what you do. And like, this is like a man's man. He's like, I could never. And I was like, he's like, no, you couldn't pay me enough to do this, right? I mean, I talked about things just going wrong, tragedy after whatever. And I have a big smile on my face. And I say to any entrepreneur, think about the worst thing that could happen. And if you're able to smile through it and look forward to the next day and how to figure it out the next day, then that might be what you need to be doing, because nothing can deter you at that point. And that's where I'm at.
Excellent.
I hope that
Excellent.
was helpful.
That was very helpful. And then our last question before we close out is, what legacy do you hope to leave? You have your businesses, you talk about the vision for that, but you as Nia Grace, what legacy do you hope to leave?
The legacy that I hope to leave is absolutely rooted in joy. I want that to be, at the end of the day, we always talk about we've got one life to live. This is it. And I want to be the one who is always known to bring people joy. So whether that's on the table, on the stage, with a friendly hello when I pick up the phone, I just want it to be all about joy.
Absolutely. And that's a great way to end this. End with joy. So
Thank you.
thank you, Nia, for joining me on Level Up with Wondr. I'm sure our listeners are also thanking you when they're listening to this amazing advice, hearing your story and learning from you. This was a very insightful and delightful conversation, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Level Up with Wondr. Visit wondernation.com/level up for more podcast episodes about how we're reimagining the gaming entertainment industry. Want to level up your business? Visit our contact page at wondernation.com to inquire about our strategic consulting or management services.